Hey, welcome to Comic Art Convo. I'm Aaron Lopresti, and this is James Mealy, also known as
All
Sequential
right,
Art.
partners. Let's keep on rolling, baby. You know what time it is.
Oh my God. We're getting crazy already. We've only been on for 10 seconds.
Oh, come on. You know where that's from, Aaron.
No, I probably do. Why don't I know? I should know.
Come on, you're old, but you're not that old.
What
Limp
did you
Bizkit rolling. That's the very beginning of the song.
That's...
Oh my God, that is sad. That is sad. You really are old.
Perhaps.
You're making Art to Bear look young now. Oh my God, I can't believe it.
Mentally, I'm just not there. I'm half. I got one foot in the grave. I think. I just don't know. I'm gonna make sure I'm turning my phone off right now, which I should have done before the show started, but then I just turned it off so we won't be interrupted. You know what? Today, huge show. We're talking about inkers, which is always they used to be my number one target for dissatisfaction, and then colorists became my number one target in recent years. So I'm not going to insult.
They've phased out inkers a lot now.
Yeah, well, it's true. What inkers do becomes sort of irrelevant now in the way the current coloring is done in comics, or they can be anyway. But so I'm just going to talk about my favorites. I'm not going to insult anybody. James, how about you? Are you going to be just talking about your favorites? Or are you going to throw some shots out there?
They're all ones that I love. I think they're great inkers. I think they add to people's work rather than detract. So that's who I chose.
All right. Well, let's take a quick look in the chat before we get rolling here. Leg Kick is here because Leg Kick, of course, is almost always here. Chris, whose last name I always avoid like the plague because I don't. How do you think Majorana? How do you think you say that?
Majorana is how I would say it.
Okay, Chris Majorana. There we go, Chris. I hope we're correct. Wow, last Saturday of the month already. I know. Time flies, and we're in September. I just told my mom, my 91-year-old mother, who I always have stuffing bags and boards with comics. I said, we're going to be getting out Christmas decorations here before long, and it feels like we just put them away. Time is moving.
Well, that's because you keep them up until June anyway, Aaron, before you take them down. That's
exactly right. Then 2 months later, it's time to put them back up again. Leg Kick says, Marvel looks like they're trying to copy CG with their Nosferatu, but it won't be even close to as good as yours and Chance, Aaron. I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but because I don't pay attention to that stuff, but it wouldn't surprise me. When I first released Wraith of God, or the campaign launched last year, I remember a bunch of news came out about Marvel bringing back their Black Rider, and then now recently I've heard they're going to do something with the Western Ghost Rider. So don't think that they don't know what we're doing, because they clearly do.
Isn't that what the mainstream is for now? Just to rip off everyone else's better ideas?
That's right. They don't have any good ones
for now.
Yeah, they don't have any good ones. Everybody's left the mainstream, is doing their own thing. So Killer Squid's here. He says, why do I think Vince Coletta's name will come up? I don't know why you think that, because I don't think it's going to. Flying Saucer is here. David Brohawk Williams gives us his top 10 already. Gary Martin, Carl Kiesel. He misspelled Carl's name, but that's all right. Carl will forgive him. Terry Austin, Richard Friend, Carl Story, Mark Morales, Dexter Vines, Mike S. Miller. He likes Mike S. Miller as an anchor. Danny Mickey, and then, of course, himself, because he couldn't put a list out without including himself. Jefferson Roswell is here.
I guess we should be thankful that David just didn't say his name 10 times.
That's right. Do we need to have two lists, anchors and finishers? Oh, that's interesting. Paul Brillard is here. Hey, Paul, good to see you. Good to see that you're here. Fox Mulder is in the chat. H is for Heretic. Richie Dupe. Hello, Aaron. Hail Sequential. Hail the chat, and bananas to all. I think Richie Dupe is a monkey. He's always pushing bananas. Marvel has been weak sauce for years now, says Mike McMahon. Yeah, that's for sure. Gentlemen, we are talking about ink slingers. And of course, Dave Ulbrich, former publisher of Malibu Comics and Ultraverse, also has his own YouTube channel called Geekview Tavern. he's not here. He wants to let everybody know that he's officially not in the chat. Marcus Killigrew likes Joe Sinnott. Well, we'll see. Well,
Wait a minute. Is that a positive to me or is that a negative to you? I can't tell which.
Sequential Treasures goes on Aaron's show to make himself look younger, and it actually works. Boy, I just can't. I don't like to do that on anything but the Sunday show, but Jeff, you earned that one. Bill Everett should have inked Kirby's Thor. That's all I'm saying.
I think there was. I know there's at least one issue that he inked. I think it's Thor 171 that Bill Everett inked Kirby's Thor. So he did ink Kirby's Thor.
Yeah, I think he's like if Everett had been full time over the top of Kirby instead of Vinnie Coletta on Thor, it might have been stronger. And Horror Mike likes Joe Sinnott. So, well, and Brian Suddenly Old is here as well. So let's quit screwing around and get to it.
But before we do, one little thing. Graded comics. Now, I got a couple here that I know Aaron has seen them already, but most of you probably have not. And I've got a new one in that even Aaron hasn't seen. I just got this one in. So,
okay.
First up, 9/6, Star Wars 101, Bill Sienkiewicz cover.
Wait a minute. Didn't you show that last time?
Yes. Okay. That was on your late night show, but most people probably didn't see it. That's why I'm showing them.
That's where it was. Okay.
This is for everyone else so that they can see them. And then, of course, the one Aaron Trulip, my 9/4 Conan 37, the only single issue done by Neil Adams entirely, where he did the interiors as well as the cover.
That is a great freaking issue. I have a really nice high grade cover. It's not slabbed or high grade copy. It's not slabbed, but that is nice. Love that book.
Now we got the final one here, the one that I just got in. The 9/6 Incredible Hulk 338.
Ooh.
This was one of the first books I bought off the newsstand when I got into comics back in October of '87, and it's my first exposure to Todd McFarlane because the cover is by Steve Geiger and Bob McLeod, but the interiors are McFarlane. So this is my first McFarlane book.
I don't even know who Steve Geiger is. I've never even heard of that name before. But that's the cover penciler, huh?
He was around in the '80s. I loved it. I liked his work. So, but there you go. So there's a little bit more slab coolness for everyone. It's probably going to be the last one I get for a while as money's tightening up. Thank you, Joe Biden.
I'm still spending it even though I don't have any. I just bought a couple books, but I've actually prepared unboxing videos for them. So I'm not going to show them here because I'm going to post them on these little short videos. So anyway, are you ready to rock and roll, James? Are you ready?
I am. And Porcunt's ready because he said he loves Cynthia Martin. That's who did that Star Wars issue, the interiors.
Cynthia Martin.
Cynthia Martin.
Richie Dupe says, I couldn't be trusted with a graded book. I'd sweat all over it or something. That's why it's in a plastic case so you can't soil it. Okay. All right. So do you want me to bring up the picture first or what do you want to do here?
Yeah. The way I'm doing mine, guys, is I've got a splash page and then a panel page to kind of show you the how their styles of these inkers work, in like a larger image versus smaller imaging and stuff like that. So that's how I did mine. So let's Are you sure these aren't out of order? I don't think they should be. I have the number. That splash page that says next duty elsewhere. And I guess it's an X-Men page. Is that what you want me to bring up first? No, the first one should be the Alien Legion page I have. It's a splash page.
Okay, maybe that's what that is. I thought it was an X-Men page, but maybe it's a splash page. It has those guys with the wings on their heads, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're okay then. That's what it. I didn't recognize this, but so here we go. You can tell us all about this, James. What are we looking at here?
This is a page from issue 7 of volume 2 of Alien Legion by Larry Stroman, inking by Mark Farmer. That's Farmer. Yes, I remember back when we did our crossovers, and I did the Alien Legion crossover, and I said, if we're going to have Dark Stars, it would have to be Larry Stroman did, and we'll probably get Mark Farmer to ink them. This is Farmer and Stroman right here. Wow, that is very early Farmer. Looks like he's, of course, Stroman's. I wouldn't pick,
Farmer to ink Stroman normally, but so maybe he's doing his best to kind of emulate a Stroman type line
Well, what
here.
I liked about it is he brought a tightness to Stroman's work, because we're all familiar with Larry's work. He's very loose. It's like sometimes you can't even tell what you're looking at sometimes in some of the close-ups Larry does.
Mm.
But like with Farmer inking him, I thought it was just a beautiful marriage. Like you look at that those little fine line details on the figures there, right there in the center. And but then when you back it out and you see all those characters all in black, the blacks are soaking and deep and rich. All that black. I mean, it's just beautifully done. Farmer, again, he's like one of those inkers. I think no matter who he works on, he can make them look better. And Stroman to me never looked better than when he was being inked by Farmer.
Interesting. Now, see, I like I said, I had never known that this had actually ever happened. I'm a big Mark Farmer fan as well, and I would agree with you. I rarely saw anybody inked by Farmer that didn't look better when he got a hold of them. I remember, who Dave Ross is, don't you?
Yes.
He had a pinup, or it might have been a cover. I remember at a New York show. I mean, this was decades ago. But Dave had a cover that Farmer inked, and we were both just marveling at it. And I remember Dave just like, I'm never selling this, man, and it was like, he never looked that good. And I like Dave's stuff a lot, but that Farmer ink job over him really was really nice. So yes, we're both on board with Farmer. Now let's take a look at the second piece.
So I guess, and you said you were intrigued by hearing him working with Larry Stroman on Alien Legion. So that's why I had to include a nice splash image for you. And so that's the kind of quality you got on that Alien Legion volume when it was Stroman and Farmer together. So,
well, I leave it to you, James, to pull something out of the weeds that I wasn't expecting. Here we go. Now this
is Farmer, doing a panel page with the great Dale Keown from their classic Hulk run. And again, it's all about the fine line work. Look at the fine line work in Betty's hair in the second and the fourth panel. The fine detail of the lines that he does in there, the softness of the hair. Even on Marlowe here in that shot there. I mean, look at the fine. It's so wispy, and if it was in black and white, you might not even notice it. But it's like almost like he's just barely touching it, and yet it gives it such volume and such great textures. And then you go down towards the last two panels and you see those shots of the Hulk with the lines, the vertical lines and the shadowing on his face. And it just tells the entire thing right there. Look at that. Look at the expressiveness of the way he used that shading. Just letting the light peek through just a little bit on certain parts of his skin and parts of his face and hand, and all the rest is just shadowed up, and it's like it just tells the story without any dialogue. What that is. And again, this is why I like Farmer. He's been able to, he's just got a great touch to what he does, no matter who he's working on. Someone is as like abstract as Larry Stroman, someone is mainstream as Dale Keown. It doesn't matter. He improves them all, no matter what he does. That's why he's one of my favorite inkers.
Well, he's, he kind of epitomized the new look brush inker of the 80s and 90s. He was really sort of the trendsetter. I don't think there was a more popular brush inker than he was during this period of time. I mean, everybody wanted him, to ink their stuff. I remember Bagley tried to get him on Spider-Man. It was just like everybody wanted Farmer. I don't want to be a downer here, but is poor cunt? Are you saying did Dave Ross pass away? I didn't know that.
I hadn't heard about that either. I thought there would have been like some notice somewhere on like comic Twitter or comic forums, people talking about the passing of someone like Dave Ross.
Yeah, I thought well, anyway, can you clarify that, Pork, when you get a second? But anyway, of course, Farmer, which we don't have here that maybe I'll share later, is
Brian Suddenly Old asked, was that practical or digital on that Hulk? And this is like from like 1990. Yeah, 1990, I think. So I mean, that was definitely not digital. That was definitely practical effect.
Well, this line work could be Zipatone. I'm not saying it was, but it's awfully perfect. so it wouldn't be unheard of at this stage.
Yeah, but even if it is Zipatone or actual ink, it's still a practical effect. It wasn't digital.
No, right. But it looks like it could have been that and for those who don't know, Zipatone were like dot patterns or line patterns that were on clear plastic film, and you could cut out pieces of them and put them over the original art to create an effect. And that's probably what happened here. Somebody like Gary Martin would have done that by hand, and it would have looked just perfect like that, you know.
Gary, that's because Gary's insane.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's just nuts. But his technical proficiency is just ridiculous.
Yeah, Richie Duke, this piece, this is from 1990. This is from Incredible Hulk number 383.
Yeah, Dale came on about, well, Byrne was started at what, about 319, 314, somewhere in that neighborhood.
314 to 319 was Byrne's run. Then it was Al Milgram and like a bunch of, hodgepodge artists for about a year. And then McFarlane came on. And then McFarlane left. And then Jeff Purves comes on.
Right, Purves, yeah.
Leaves, and then Dale comes on. Dale comes on issue 367. His first issue was the only one inked by Marie Severin.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point on, Dale went on to almost to issue 400, which, kind of sucked that they pulled him off, before he finished that run. That would have been, should let him do issue 400 after doing all the rest for like the last 3 years.
Yeah, but he was going to Image and they got pissed at him, I believe, is how the story goes. But this is a really, I would love to have one of these pages, but original, but they're not giving these away. I can tell you that. Let me see. Pork Hunt has not responded to my Dave Ross question. Oh, here, wait a minute. Well, Pork Hunt posted, but he still hasn't posted a follow-up on that Dave Ross question. So I guess that'll be a mystery, at least for a while. Okay, so we can both agree that Mark Farmer
is definitely high quality. Like I said, he's the kind of anchor, like I said, just to me, no matter who he works on, he makes them look better than they would without him.
And he would have been a terrific anchor over me because especially my, till most recently, my stuff has always been a brush, favorable to brush inking. And I never got to work with him. So that's kind of one of the bummers of my career because I love his stuff. But let's move along. We don't want to heap too much praise on just one guy.
No.
So here we go. Here's your second.
This is from Cloak and Dagger #1, the 1985 regular series with by Rick Leonardi and Terry Austin. I mean, you can't talk about great inkers and not mention Terry Austin. That's like just not done.
I was going to ask you if this was Rick, but you already answered it. So that is
Rick Leonardi. And again, the thing that I noticed with Austin is very detailed line work. Like you can see, look at the floor where the guy is on the inside of that booth, and look at the floor with the little lines all on there to indicate wood. And yet he puts the lines in the reflective glass up in the top and towards the bottom, so you can see just enough detail so you can tell that's a glass partition in between the two, and all the detail in the girl's green dress, just with a swooping back and forth with all those various lines. Some inkers would probably go heavy, and those spots would be a lot thicker. He makes sure they're thin so you can feel that like that dress she's wearing is light, and it's sort of like, I don't want to say see-through, but like a very thin material, and that's how that would work. And it's just the attention to detail that Austin puts in his inking is just absolutely incredible. Very few inkers are that detail oriented in my experience.
Well, speaking of the devil, Dale Keown is in the chat, and he's saying Mark Farmer rules, and he would know because he worked. Obviously, we just showed some of Dale's great work. I was going to include Dale as one of my favorite inkers as well, but then I thought, well, no, I'm just going to pick guys that mostly just inked other people. But Dale's ink work over himself is freaking incredible. But so welcome, Dale. Appreciate you having you there. Dale!
Entity says, yeah, it's like silk. Exactly. That's exactly what that dress feels like. I mean, you almost like if you were to rub your finger on it, it would feel like silk the way he inked that.
Right, and she'd slap your face.
So detailed and so smooth. But again, if you go to our next piece here with Terry, you'll see even more of what I'm talking about with the whole detail-oriented aspect to his inking style.
I'd
So
like,
we
there's
have
a
here
question
this-
that came up in the chat about asking Dale if he preferred McLeod or Farmer. That's an interesting
And
question.
this is from Uncanny X-Men Annual number 10, with Terry inking the great Art Adams. And again, just that central panel of Wolverine as he's tearing off the mask. Look at all those little lines he puts on for his body hair. I mean, just all that. It's just, it's insane. And then the next following panels, all the scratches in the wall behind Karma, and you know the stuff, and all the body hair. It's just so over. Even if you go to the top, that one shot, the close up of the eye, the other side.
There you
it
go.
is. Look at the, in just something that small, and look, you can see like the crow's feet in his eyes. It's so detailed. I mean, this is why Terry Austin is a legend, is because he can pull off stunts like this with guys, you know, whether they're more, you know, more slick-minded the way like a Leonardi is, or whether they're hyper detail guys like Art Adams, and he can put on all that detail himself, and it's incredible to watch him work.
Well, it's also, if you look at that close-up of that eye, the line weights underneath the sweat or the water, whatever that is, dripping on him, on something that small. A lot of guys wouldn't take the time to do that, to give that water a little bit of weight. But he, if you can see these heavier lines right under here.
Right at the very edges of like where the water is dripping. Yeah.
Right. To give it some weight. Of course, we all know Terry is sitting on a ton of John Byrne X-Men covers that are worth a fortune, and you keep thinking, why doesn't he sell those and cash in? But who knows?
I mean, there you go, right there. Just go to Wolverine's arm. I mean, look at all that. Look at all that line. I mean, you know, my hands are hurting just looking at that. I mean, no one should ever feel, I'm guessing there's no inker that ever feels great when they're hearing, oh yeah, you're going to ink Art Adams. But I mean, Austin, I mean, the way, look at that. I mean, he makes it look so easy.
You know, the interesting thing though, I wonder if, and I'm going to step out on a limb here and say he probably did, this sort of broken line ink style was probably originated by Terry, because I don't remember anybody doing it before Austin did. And here's another little factoid for you. Gary Martin assisted Terry Austin. And it's funny because he doesn't ink anything like Terry does, but yeah, he worked with Terry, like doing backgrounds and stuff and doing ink assists. So there's a Naked Wolverine with some shadow placed in the right spot.
Appropriately, strategically placed shadow.
Yeah, but Terry Austin, he was the.
Ellie Munnose says it right here. Yeah, Terry Austin is a beast. He is.
Well, if you think about it, you take the 80s and early 90s. He was the pen guy, and Scott Williams later kind of took that mantle from him. And Farmer was the brush guy back in that period of time.
Yep.
So some really amazing work there. So, okay, I'm on board with your first two choices. Let's see if you can. I may not agree with you on your third one, though. We shall see. All right.
All right. This is from the Incredible Hulk number 295. Pencils by Sal Buscema. Inks by Danny Bulinatti, who is one of my personal favorite inkers. I know not everybody cares for him, but he was part of that Filipino, guys that came in, like the Dizuniga and what's his name, Alcala, and all those guys.
Rudy Nebres, I thought this was Nebres at first when I saw that inking, because
this is Danny Bulinatti.
Yeah,
and what I like about it is, as we all know, Sal's pencils. He's a very angular artist. His stuff, there's a lot of sharp lines when Sal draws something. He's not very, it's very boxy in a way, his style, the way he draws. And yet when you look at this image and you see Bulinatti's inks, I mean, he rounds off those hard edges that would normally be found in Buscema. I mean, you can still tell it's Buscema, but it's rounded, it's softer, it's not as hard as Buscema would be if he inked himself, or if maybe there was some other inker, like say Mike Esposito or somebody who would have inked Sal in the past, who follows his hard lines a lot closer. Here, Bulinatti adds textures and smoothness to it to round it and soften the image. And so, like, you can see it looks like skin now, whereas, otherwise it might not. The shadowing, like that arm on that creature in the front here, just the shadowing on that arm is just so well done. And the texture right there in the muscles of the chest and the six pack. It's just all of that. It's nice and dark and yet it's got a softness to it. It rounds out what would normally be very hard angular line work by the great Sal Buscema.
I like, some of the stuff I'm seeing right in here, which really typically, now maybe I didn't pay that much attention to Danny's stuff, but he wasn't doing this type of stuff over Paul Ryan. I think Paul would have preferred a more richer approach like this than he got from Danny when he was inking him. So he certainly was versatile in his approaches.
Well, and again, the thing is, it's to me in this with Bulinatti, what it's about line weight. The way he does the line weight on Buscema here, like I said, that brings that roundness and that softness to Buscema's probably much harder, more angular lines. And that's, again, look at the Hulk here in the background. Look at the shadowing. Again,
it looks like Nebres.
It does, but I'm saying, but there's that softness in the way he approaches it, and it's just, it makes it great. I loved his. That's why Bulinatti is one of my favorite inkers. Is he does it, and he has an ability to take a classic artist like a Sal Buscema, and sort of like maybe you could say almost like in a way modernize their work a little bit. Where Sal's work, it's classic and we all love it, but it's almost like if you look at his classic work, it's set to the time that it was made. Whereas this kind of brought it, like this is from the 80s, and he kind of gave Sal a bit of an 80s edge in this image that Sal wouldn't have had on his own.
No, that's true. I'll give you that. This is actually a pretty strong image by Danny. I think. So there you go. Okay, let's take a look at his some of his panel stuff here. And this is Paul Ryan.
And I had to put in something from your late friend there, because him and Danny did have a long relationship. And again, it's all about the line weights. The keys here are the third panel with the close-up of the fist of the thing and the last panel. And just look at the line weights he uses on the rocks. The different thicknesses and thinnesses to get that texture of rock. It looks like rock. And, it's all because of the line weight choices that he makes on how to ink those rock shapes.
But it's interesting to take a look at how he approached Paul differently than, say, how that Sal Buscema piece. This is much more pen-centric. The line work here wasn't as lush as what he did. It's almost like he was trying to emulate more of a modern 90s kind of inking style.
Well, this was nice. This is from FF number 357. It's only the second issue that Paul had done, so this is like very early in the run. I see, and even like on the thing here, look at on his chest, the line differences, the line weight differences between all the lines. Again, to give that texture, that sense of like hardness to his rocky skin. I mean, again, it's just very well done. Again, this is a technique that a lot of inkers I think sometimes have problem with, is knowing the proper line weights to use on certain textures or certain images. That's what I've found whenever I've seen like a penciler who tries to ink themselves and they're not very adept at it. This is what they lack. They lack that understanding of the proper line weight to use in a given situation. And it comes off flat, whereas this doesn't. This has the texture. This has the feel that you want.
No, Danny's stuff was very professional and competent. I mean, he understood, like you said, separating images and stuff. And I mean, that's basically, you use line weights to either create a feeling of shadow, but usually mostly for depth purposes, to kind of separate your foreground figures from your midground and background. And a lot of times people don't do that much anymore because they let the colorists worry about it. But back in this day and age, when we were still using flat color, the inking was more important and the line weights were very important.
Yes.
So, but again, I'm not a huge Danny Bulinatti fan, but I will give you your due and say, okay, if he's one
Well,
of yours,
Porcunt
I
was
won't
responding.
mock you for it.
Porcunt responding to a Marcus Killigrew said that Kieran Dwyer's work looked very great under Bulinatti, and I totally agree because I actually own a page of Kieran's cap run inked by Danny. So like I said, I'm definitely a big fan of Bulinatti's work. So
Yeah, I didn't follow Dwyer's stuff all that much, or at least I don't remember. I remember he did an X Factor issue or two, but I can't remember beyond that. But that just could be old age. All right, now we're going to get to somebody that I think the crowd has been demanding.
yes, and I gotta say I gotta be with the crowd on this.
All right, who do we got here?
Spider Girl number 7, pencils by Pat Oliphey and inks by the legendary Al Williamson. And to me, Al is the consummate comic book inker. Like if anybody, if there's like an inker's inker, it's Al Williamson. And I know he'd done pencils and complete illustrative drawings all on his own. I know that, but his inks are just so great. And what I love here about it is the way he approaches the shadows, like looking at the buildings in the background. You see right at the tops of the buildings, all those little lines right at the top of the building to indicate a shadow. And then rather than show each individual window, he just puts in all this shadow under to kind of indicate this is where a window is, this is where a window is, this is where a window is. And it's just all like just I love that. It saves you time and yet it still looks good. You know what I'm saying?
It still works.
It's like an inking shortcut that an inker if they have the skill, they know how to use it properly, and it saves you time, but yet it still gives you the great effect you need to indicate what you're trying to indicate. And I just love that about him, is the way he's able to, with just wispy lines, able to convey images in a way that otherwise wouldn't be conveyed that way.
So this is Pat Oliff did the pencils, you said?
Yes. From issue 7 of Spider Girl, yes.
This is I liked Williamson. Always seemed to be when he was inking, I liked his stuff more. This is a little tighter. I prefer when he went more sort of from the Klaus Janson school, when he would ink, say, Lee Weeks or he inked J.R. Jr. for sure, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He did very much so.
Yeah, and that's what I remember.
In fact, that's one of my favorite comic. Like if you were to say pick out your top 10 favorite comic book art teams of all time, Romita Jr. and Al Williamson would be one of my top 10 for sure.
Well, then let's take a look at a page.
Yes, let's do that.
With these two giants. Here we go.
This is from Daredevil number 260. And again, you can see it. Look in that top panel with the wispy lines indicating images, like a ghostly image, but yet it's all misty because that's how the situation has been set up. And you see all that little lines. And even like in Typhoid Mary's hair in the second image, you get all that detail in her hair. Romita Jr. did not put all that detail in. That is Al Williamson doing that.
Well, and look at
here's the background of Daredevil. All those straight lines. I mean, it's incredible the amount of detail he puts in the backgrounds that way. That's like otherwise it would just be empty space.
Well, it's interesting because Williamson and J.R. Jr. sort of became, like, as I mentioned before, sort of Jansen and Frank Miller. You know what I mean? They sort of became that sort of a team for a long while there. And this is what I remember. And I wasn't a big fan at the time of what Williamson was doing, because I was more like what Farmer was doing with all the really tight inks and everything like this. And I didn't really have an appreciation for the looseness that guys like Jansen or Al Williamson were doing on these, which I now have a much greater appreciation for. That I actually kind of think is pretty cool.
Porcunt's calling it right there. Al Williamson made John Romita Jr.'s pencils sing. Absolutely. And so it's easy to see why when Al passed on, who do you see inking Jr. now more than anybody else? Klaus Janson.
Right.
So because this look is just so definitive for Romita Jr. now.
Yes.
What he did with Williamson on Daredevil sort of defined him as an artist. And it's like, this is what people expect now. And since Al is sadly no longer with us, someone has to pick up that torch. And the only person, like you said, that could even be close to approaching that is Klaus Janson. And so whenever you see Junior now, who's inking him? It's Klaus Janson. Why? Well, because Al isn't available anymore. That's why.
Yeah. And it was interesting because John Romita Jr. was sort of a by the book.
No poor client. This is Daredevil 260, not 252.
Yeah, John Romita Jr. was for a long while there early in his career was sort of a typical comic book artist without a real sort of voice to his work. And then, you know, he started getting some, for lack of a better way of putting it, some Frank Miller influences in what he was doing. And then he, of course, got on X-Men. And, I think Dan Green inked him too pretty well, if I'm thinking correctly.
Yeah, he inked him on X-Men, yes.
And, but then, the stuff he did with Williamson here on Daredevil, then, of course, that sort of became his.
Although there were a couple issues, and I own them because they tied into the Secret Wars 2 storyline, X-Men 202 and 203, and those were inked by Williamson. Williamson inked Junior on the X-Men for a couple of issues during that crossover event. And so
a lot of guys didn't have the guts to kind of go in a different direction. And I give JR Jr. credit for doing that because he certainly did that. And I remember talking to, it was John Beatty, and we were talking about Zek, because Beatty inked Zek, for years, right? And it was, Beatty's very slick. And he was saying, they were talking about a project that we were talking about Zek, and he was saying that, Zek was looking to do something that looked a little different. So he was thinking about maybe using a different inker on a project, and they were maybe like Klaus Janson or something. And it's funny, whenever you want your stuff to look different, you always go, well, let's get Klaus Janson. He'll give it a different look, And Tom Palmer, I think it was that way a little bit too. I loved his stuff over Neil Adams, like way back when he was first starting, but Palmer became, his inking was a little bit more bold and rough.
Well, I think that was from years of working on Buscema, because like I said, I noticed, like I see Palmer when I look at, say, like some of his 70s stuff, like you said, working on with Neil Adams or with Gene Colan on Tomb of Dracula, and that stuff is beautiful. And then he went and did Avengers with Buscema for several years, and then after that, anytime he inked somebody, he inked them and tried to make them look like Buscema.
Yeah,
so, I mean, that's what happened there. Like, so like the latter days, like I call it he Palmerized them. They all look like John Buscema after he worked with John for years on Avengers.
Palmerized them, that's good. Okay, so then we move to, now I have to agree with you. I like this guy's work. This, of course, is
Brett Breeding. And this is him on Dan Jurgens. This is from Superman number 78. This is the one where we got revealed that the cyborg Superman, back when it was the reign of the Superman, and there are all these different guys, and which one's the real Superman? It turns out, of course, none of them were. And this is the Hank Henshaw evil cyborg Superman that we become later. But again, for me, with Breeding here, it's the contrast he does in this image. Like, look at the side of the cyborg Superman that's metallic versus the one that's organic. And that requires a different style of inking when you're inking metal versus inking flesh and blood. And yet he does them both well. And yet when you see, he marries them together in the image, and it all works. It's not like, it doesn't look like, oh, well, this is really hard over here and it's really soft over here. It all sort of like comes together in one single image. I mean, that image is solid. There is not a thing you can say wrong with that image of him that way. And yet, even though part of him is metal and part of him is organic, and yet it all comes together in that way. Again, that's something that a good inker needs to know how to do, is how to do contrasting. If you have two different textures or two different styles that are required, but you got to bring it together to form a cohesive image, that's what's needed. And this is what he does right here in this image. It's just perfect.
It's kind of funny, these little shiny bursts right here. Like back then, you actually had to ink those in and put them in the black and white art. Now they put them in with like a lens flare or something in Photoshop when they're coloring it. In fact, if you were to draw this as a black and white image and it was sent to a colorist, they would they would get rid of it and superimpose a color burst over it. So, and this same down here with this, this little quasar light thing going on here in space, that'd be the same way. Because I had that actually happen to me where I went in and, just when it's like probably at Malibu when we were kind of first shifting over to digital coloring, and we weren't sort of used to that. And so I would go in and put stuff in there that they just could easily do in Photoshop, and they would go over the top of it and like make a burst or something and go, oh, wow, that looks cooler than what I drew. But it is funny to kind of dates these a little bit to see these sort of little, shines coming off, these stylized shines coming off the metal here.
Oh, well, here's an interesting one from our last little discussion about Tom Palmer from Marcus Killigrew. Is that John Buscema did very loose layouts on the second Avengers run, so Palmer was doing a lot of penciling as well. I did not know that.
Finishes. That's probably very true. And Leg Kick liked Bob Layton on JR Jr. That's the thing with
no, their run on Iron Man was classic, to be sure. But but personally for me, just again, maybe it's because of when I come in in the 80s, I thought Layton was much better working on Mark Bright.
Well, the thing is though, JR Jr. wasn't really, he was in his older his old style when Layton was inking him, more traditional comic book approach, until he switched over to what we were looking at when Williamson was inking him. So that Layton probably would have inked him better doing that type of thing than what he was doing on Daredevil.
Well, we do have one single image of Layton inking Romita, say post, Al Williamson, and it's the cover to Iron Man number 256, and that's a cover where Junior penciled it and Layton inked it. And again, yeah, you're right. It's not nearly as sharp as the work they did back in like the 70s when he was doing the series regular with him.
Well, Layton's a slicker inker. He's more of a 70s and 80s kind of approach.
No, but I'm saying, but you can see if you look at that one Iron Man cover they did later versus the earlier work they did before, and it doesn't. You would say it's a completely different artist, but you can tell how much Junior's style itself had changed from those years when they were working together to that point, because of how he's probably working on Daredevil and everything. And so
I agree with that. Okay, so
this is the final image here, and I saved it for the end because I thought it was just a great image to end on. This is from the Mighty Thor number 390. This is breeding inking Ron Friends, which I think is again one of my top 10 teams of all time is Friends and Breeding. They are perfect together. I love the slickness he brings in. And if you see right here on the one leg of the guy in the armor, you can see the zipatone on that leg. I love Zip. And the way he puts it on to get the gradations in the armor is just very well done. I love that touch. And again, he uses the inking, in a way that offsets what's actually showing. Because you see here, he's being blasted from behind with all that light. Now, if this is reality, you wouldn't even hardly see Steve Rogers here because he'd be so backlit, he'd be all darkness. But yet he knows that that's not what the image needs. It doesn't need the reality of this. It's all about the punch, and it's about I got to get So he inks him in the way he should look if there was no light around at all, and yet you got all that light behind it to get the impact of the and the way he does it just draws you right into the center to Steve Rogers, just right in there.
Well, Ron was definitely from the Ron Friends was definitely in the Buscema school, and really he was kind of
Kirby. I see Kirby influence in Friends as well.
But I mean, his drawing was more reminiscent of Buscema in terms of the stylistically, but he was still drawing sort of classic, 60s, 70s comics there, even into the 80s. Where you'd get an image like this, and you don't get these kind of powerful superhero images that much in comics anymore, unless, of course, you're reading the independent market, where we're actually doing old style comics now. Whether that's CG or other people, other groups doing it. Modern comics tend to be more static and illustrative.
The mainstream isn't going to give you this kind of stuff anymore.
No, and but this is, to me, this panel is why a kid would read comics in the first place, right?
Yes.
And it's just a a terrific page on a lot of levels, but just from a pure dynamic superhero, it's a great piece.
And again, what better way to end my talking on this than with Steve Rogers hefting the hammer of Thor? I mean, come on.
That's right. Well, now is this Steve Rogers?
Yes.
So he became U.S. agent.
This is during the period where Steve Rogers was out as Captain America and became just the captain.
Oh, this is the cat. Well, wait a minute. Who is U.S. agent?
What happened is after Walker kind of goes rogue, and then Rogers fights him and he defeats him, and they bring Rogers back as Captain America. They faked Walker's death and then gave him this outfit and created the U.S. agent. The government did. So that's what happened. So it's like Steve wore this outfit because Walker was wearing the Cap suit, and then when Walker was no longer Cap, they gave him Steve's suit from here.
I see. All right. See, I'm glad you were here to explain this stuff to me, because my memory isn't as good as it used to be.
Ellie Mundo's kapwak. Yeah, I love that. Those classic sound effects.
I know. Isn't that great? I love those, man. I try to put those in my artwork, even like on Wraith of God and Garbage Man. Whenever I feel like there's a real prominent sound effect needed, I always try to work that into the art.
That's something else I miss in the comics is the great sound effects. You got like Pawak or like Vok, like you're hitting somebody in the bread basket and it goes Vok, like like that sucker sound, or like of course the classic from John Workman, Brakathoom, just these classic sound effects that just immediately what it is.
Yep. Legkick says, have you ever worked with Zipatone, Aaron? Yeah, but I did actually a Planet Surface in a book for Malibu called God Wheel, which had a bunch of the different Malibu characters in it. It was one of the latter things before the company went under. And I had this whole planets in the foreground. I did all this surface stuff, and I had these different Zipatone patterns and everything. And this is a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier about the shine on the metal. So I went to the colors, and it came back, and they just got rid of all the Zipatone and just put in like something that made it look more like a planet. So, but I did occasionally, but I didn't ink a ton of my stuff, especially early on in my career when Zip was still readily used. But Gary Martin used some Zip on me in sludge and stuff on occasion. So we did use it.
For me, I love Zip because to me, Zip, there is nothing that is more comics that says comic art more than Zipatone.
Oh my gosh, isn't there? That is so true. All right, we're going to jump to my list. Now, some of these guys I worked with and some of them I haven't, but I'm going to go with the guys I worked with that I really liked, and then some guys that I wish I got a chance to work with and never did. So now some of you have probably seen this image before, but it's so freaking good. I'm going to share it with you again. This, of course, is the great, and not late, but great Danny Mickey. And this is a Garbage Man pinup that I penciled that is in the Garbage Man trade paperback. But Judas Priest. And my pencils were pretty detailed, but come on, man. Look at this.
I mean, just that big hand right there. I mean,
yes,
that is insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's I just Danny instinctively knows, for a modern inker, he knows when to go in and break up some black into line work to kind of create texture and perhaps a kicker lighting source, like an underneath lighting source, which this had on it. And it just instinctively knows how to do that, so it looks really, really cool. But all this crackling and texturing in here, he put this in. I'm pretty sure I had black X's in all of this, and then he went in with the whiteout and, put in some of that, all this extra texturing and stuff. And it just looks
trying to make it look veiny, like it's pulsating underneath the skin.
Exactly. And, just look at the work on this. And again, I put a lot of detail into this originally, but not like this. I mean, he just went nuts. I mean, look at this stuff in here.
This sounds like you talking about Wrightson's that one Frankenstein image in the lab, and you did that one shot of Esther in her room with all the stuff on the walls and on the tables, and you're like, wow, this room is so packed full of stuff. And then you look at Wrightson's lab. You're like, oh my God, this room is practically barren.
And I know there's nothing in here. What a hack I am. But look at this. Look at this cross hatching in here for the shadow, just to put a highlight in the shadow. You know, it's just nuts. And even the like this rebar, the lighting, and how he doesn't just throw some lines in there. He actually weights those lines to give it like some thickness and a real solid weight
Well, and
to
again,
it.
yeah, on even there on that rebar is he you can see on the at the very bottom of it he puts in the white line of just bright where he breaks up the black to indicate like a light source, like there's light directly hitting that one point on it, but nowhere else.
Yep.
That's why you see all the gradations of the lines on the rest, but in that one spot it's just being blinded with light, and that's
it's just freaking awesome. So this is like, this will
and
never
like
leave
that
my
moss
possession.
on that tree there. I mean, you feel like if you rubbed your hand on that image, you'd feel the moss.
Yeah, I know. It's just freaking incredible. Look, so he goes here, and this is also in a lot of ways very Wrightson-esque, right? And I set the drawing up that way because obviously I'm a big Wrightson fan, but how he went in here, this area right in here, and that looks very kind of Wrightson-y, which is very weird because Danny, you wouldn't consider Danny to be a Wrightson type inker. But holy crap, just look at this stuff. And even just the trees back here where he decided to leave some light, you know, white areas to create shape and texture.
Porkhunt kind of agrees. He goes, Danny Mickey came out of nowhere, fully formed as an inker. Liefeld held him back from his other pencilers at Extreme, wanting him to himself.
Oh, it's yeah, he's just.
I think that might be more so because Rob needs a good inker to ink him.
This is just freaking incredible. I mean, you can just sit there and look at this drawing all day long, which I do. This has kind of got some Wrights and Frankenstein stuff. Now, this I did put in the penciling, this line work on the rocks, because I was trying to emulate some Wrights and stuff, but he just does it so well. You know, I can put those lines down and you can ruin it as an inker, and he did not. You know, he knows when to break it up, when to put in some heavier shadows.
Ellie Mundos has a suggestion for you here, Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron should make a Velvet Garbage Man poster from this page.
Well, I did color it. I colored it, and that was kind of, scary because you're like, you almost don't want to, because it's so beautiful as a black and white piece. But it is in the both as a black and white and a color piece in the Garbage Man trade paperback at the end of the book. But there it is. So Danny Mickey's probably my favorite inker. But I worked with him on a couple projects, but not very. He did some of the Planet Hulk stuff, and he did some shorter X-Men things that we did, but not very often because I was always working on lame projects, and he was always working on top of the line stuff, and he was not going to step down to work with me, even though
he wasn't going to slum it and work with Aaron Lopresti.
No, although he says he loves my stuff because I had this sort of classical approach to classic comic book approach to drawing, and he got to go in there and just get to put like modern rendering over the top of a more classical approach, because I encouraged him to do it. I was like, dude, don't be a slave to my pencils, do you, because I always knew it'd look better. My second favorite inker that all time that worked over me, of course, was a guy that I worked with most of the time.
I'm going to go Matt Ryan?
Matt Ryan, yeah. Who would have guessed, right? Matt's a brush inker, but as you can see, has tremendous control. And he inks me the way I would ink myself if I had the patience to do that kind of intricate line work, which I don't most of the time. I mean, I can do it on a cover, but on the interior, there's no way. I get bored having to do this much work.
Jiminy Cricket is going crazy. He goes, this is brush?
Yeah, this is all brush. He's right there. Honestly, he's right there with Gary Martin in terms of control.
Well, I loved his inking you on Mystic. That was great.
Beautiful work. But yeah, so there you can see this is tremendous control.
And the wife, although she may have hated the stories at the time, she loved your and him doing Wonder Woman. She thought you guys were a beautiful team as Wonder Woman artists.
Oh, thank you very much. but I drug him around with me as much as I could, because I always knew what I was going to get, and I knew it'd be good. And that's, you know, you can never take that for granted, you know.
Well, again, like I've said before, talking with Dan Lawless, he said this. He goes, the best that you can mostly hope for is that you get an inker who understands your pencils and knows exactly what to do.
Right. And Matt was that guy. I mean, and if I wanted him to go in and say, hey, do a little bit more like Danny Mickey, he could bring a little bit of that to the table too. And so later, like on these issues, this is some of the last stuff we did together, but you can see how it's getting a little bit more angular, and it used to be much softer when we worked together. Like look at Green Lantern's knee, like right in here, this type of stuff. That's more of a Mickey influence that I was trying to get out of him, rather than have everything be super, super slick and perfect, which Matt does really well, but to kind of chunk it up a little bit, which he was able to do. And it gave it a little bit more energy. But yeah, he's terrific. Absolutely terrific.
Yeah, Jiminy, I'm sure Aaron would also love that as well. See Jiminy Cricket right here.
I'd love to see Kevin Nolan's inks on Aaron. Yeah, so would I. And he's a guy like, well, we'll get to him in just a minute, actually, because he's actually on my list. So we'll get to him in a minute. Guys that inked me, probably my third favorite, and this is hard to do because I've had guys like Gary Martin ink me, and I've had some really good inkers over me, but just guys that sort of got my aesthetic at the time I wanted it to look a certain way. And this is another guy that I worked with occasionally, Norm Rapmund. And
with Norm's work.
Now, see, Norm's a pen inker, and you can tell, like, look at this Hulk hand. And that's a typical, this broken line effect here is very, and you get these kind of pointy edges on the lines. That's a surefire giveaway that the guy is a pen inker. And the only guy I've seen that's really mastered making the brush line look like a pen line, is Jonathan Glapian, who I thought was a pen inker because he inked me on one issue of Metamorpho. And I was like, wow, dude. And I said that, some really nice pen work. And he's like, oh, it's brushed. I'm like, what? Are you nuts? So he actually emulates a pen line with his brush, but this Norm is a pen inker.
Well, and I can see from the way he approaches this, he gives you sort of like a Todd Knock look to your work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
Because I know Norm has worked with Todd in the past and worked with him on stuff. So I see a Todd Knock influence in like the way the way the shadows are done, the way the little gravity fritz of the way he does the lines on stuff is it very much has a Todd Knock feeling.
Right. These little dots and stuff that you see on the end of those pen lines I always felt were really, really super interesting. And this kind of, look at the chunkiness here on these knuckles, these line weights here. I really like that. And because it's something that's not in my pencils. My pencils are very smooth and 70s influenced, obviously.
Well, and the way he uses line weights, like on that hand right there, you can see like the bottom of the hand, like, if you just look directly at the line, it looks like it goes straight from that dark shadow right over into the forearm. But yet the way he does a line weight, he gets that curve in there, so you can see that it actually curves in to the palm. Mm-hmm. And again, that's something that if you got an inker who doesn't know what they're doing, that hand would look very like it's all just one big thick line, and yet he gets in there with just enough detail to round that and make it say, oh no, it's not all one. That's the back of the palm.
This image has been used quite a bit by Marvel, or was for a while there, as a Hulk image. And this is, there's pages you keep, and this is one that I've kept and still have and will have. But yeah, so Norm's done a few things over me, and they all looked really, really good. In fact, the last thing I did for DC was a Snickers ad with Shazam in it, and Norm inked that and then stole the pages from me. And I'm not afraid to call him out on YouTube on live streaming for never sending me back my Shazam. He's a big Shazam fan, and he really wanted to keep them. And I guess he did. Yeah, he did. So,
Shazam! They're gone.
yeah, they're gone, just like magic. Okay, so we did already talk about this guy, but gosh darn it, I'm bringing it up anyway because Mark Farmer made my list too. And I just wanted to show a nice piece he did over Alan Davis, because those guys, that was the difficult thing about getting Mark Farmer, was that he was always working with Alan Davis. And so that was his priority, right? It was him and Alan. And so you'd have to, like, to get Mark, you'd have to squeeze in between a project that he was working on with Alan Davis. And Davis was so busy in the 80s. I mean, he was always doing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was really hard to get, even into the 90s.
Although personally, just again, personal preference, I always like Paul Neary on Davis.
Really?
More than Farmer. I mean, I'm not saying Farmer's doing bad. He does absolutely beautiful work here. I mean, like I said, to me, he's one of the guys who always makes somebody look better. But if I had my druthers, if I'm the editor and I'm like, I got Alan Davis drawing it, who do I want to ink him? I'd pick Paul Neary. That would be my choice.
Yeah, but see, that's just your old vintage self saying the first time you saw Alan Davis he was inked by Paul Neary, so that's why you like him the best. I like Paul. Paul did a good job on him, don't get me wrong, but I'm much more of a, well, I shouldn't say much more, but I'm a much bigger Farmer fan. Look at this dry brush effect he did in here, which is really, really cool. And then he goes over here with just straight kind of controlled line work. That's just an interesting choice that he went in and did that, just to kind of give it a different texture. Really, really like that. And then, of course, this idea of putting a bunch of lines down and then going over the top of it with whiteout to create that lightning.
Did he do that, or did he put like maybe some little like sticky something that's there that covers it, and then just went straight over them and then peeled it off, and you got a nice white line still there? I
can't say 100% that what he did all the time, but I do have an original piece that he inked over Davis that he did lightning that way, where he did the line work underneath and he white-outed lightning over the top of it. So okay. I'm going to assume that's what he did here, but he very easily could have laid down, like, it's basically essentially super glue is what it is, rubber cement, excuse me. And you kind of paint it on. You use it for when you're watercolor painting, right? To cover up areas that you don't want the color on. And you could go ahead and do that on here, then ink around it and then just peel it off and you'd have a white space. So
I've seen artists who it's either that or it's like some kind of special tape you can like cut and size how you need it. And then you just put it on and then like you just go, when you're inking this, you just go straight through, just boom, 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 right over top of it. Doesn't matter. And then you peel it off and you get that perfect white line.
Yeah, there you go. Jiminy's putting words in my mouth. That's correct. Liquid frisket is what he's talking about. So Joseph Fazio, yo, Aaron. Hey, Joseph, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Tarks9 is here all the way from Canada.
There you go. Pork Hunt agrees with me.
He's going to be, if Pork Hunt agrees with you, then there must be some truth to it. That was okay. All righty. So that's my my shout out again to Mr. Farmer.
Although the only thing I'll give is for Pork Hunt, he's picking Uncanny 213 is the reason. For me, it was the series Excalibur that they worked on. That's where I became the Paul Neary is the best inker for Alan Davis guy from their work on
wait. Excalibur. Farmer inked him on Excalibur.
Yes, later, but the early issues.
Those were really?
Those were go back and look. In the early issues, yes.
All right, you're probably right. I mean, I'm sure you're right. I would not argue with you about that.
But you are correct that Farmer did ink him on Excalibur. It just wasn't at the beginning of the series. It was later in the series that he inked him.
Okay. All right, here he is. We talked about him earlier. Kevin Nolan. Now, Kevin,
I would have picked him too for one of mine, but I figured you would probably pick him. So since you gave me rope in our Hitchcock discussion, I let you have Nolan for this.
Well, the Nolan is, in my opinion, and if Kevin's watching, I hope he doesn't take offense to this, but Nolan has a very unique approach to anatomy and figure drawing, right? And so you put him over someone like Garcia Lopez, whose anatomy is impeccable, and then you have Nolan come in over the top of him and dress him up, you've got something really, really special. And that's what we saw here the Doctor Strange Fate, which was that what do they call those, James?
Amalgam.
When they yes, the amalgam books that Marvel and DC did back in the 90s. This, if you don't have this book, which was Doctor Strange Fate, shame on you. Go get it. I'm sure it's cheap on eBay, but what a masterful piece of work. You've got Garcia Lopez pencils and then Kevin Nolan just inking the heck out of it and giving it mood and atmosphere. Just tremendous. When Kevin inks you, you have to go in knowing or hoping, but knowing that he's going to go in and redraw stuff and change it and Nolanize it. And that's why you desperately, everybody always wants Kevin to ink them because they want original Kevin Nolan art.
Well,
and that's the best way to get it.
Not everybody, but most.
Yes.
Do, yeah. And again, again, just to bring up again, Dan Lawless is one of those. He had Nolan ink him on Strange Tales number 18 that he did the Cloak and Dagger story of, and Dan's like, he even told the editor at the time, he goes, wow, the guy's like, yeah, I'm sorry, you kind of really went heavy on it. He goes, dude, that's great, I love it. This is awesome. He goes, can we get him for the next issue too?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you've got to be able to check your ego, and but look at the texturing here on the rocks. I mean, this is all classic Nolan type stuff. I guarantee you Garcia Lopez did not put this in the pencils, and Nolan went in there and sort of created that atmosphere and that environment. Look at these rocks down here.
Well, and just the richness of the shadows.
Yes. Really understanding where to use them to get volume and depth in your artwork. I mean, it's just so, I mean, he's right up there.
Right there, that shot right there of him in front of the window in the chair, and you're getting it from the back, and it's all that shadow, and yet it works. I mean, in the hands of someone without the skills, that would just be a dark mess. You wouldn't be able to know what it is. But in Nolan's hands, it's like, wow, that is incredible.
Well, he's, in my opinion, he's right up there with Frazetta and Wrightson in spotting blacks to create volume in their work. I mean, just does such a tremendous job of it. And I would love to have him ink something of mine. But I don't know. He maybe he hates me now like everybody else does. I don't know.
Ellie Munoz, yes, Doctor Strange Fate was a one-shot comic from Amalgam when Marvel did their Marvel versus DC crossover event, and everybody got merged together in the course of the story. And so they did all these one-shot issues for that 1 month, and one was called Doctor Strange Fate. Pencils by Garcia Lopez, inks by Nolan. There was a one-shot special issue. So if you get the one issue, you've got them all. Yeah,
and it's one of those books that you just cherish for the art, kind of like was it Doctor Strange? What issue was it that Golden inked by Terry Austin in Doctor Strange? Was it 55 or 56?
55.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a single issue that you hang on to and go, this is just a great comic, piece of comic art that you just hang on to forever. All right, so now I'm going to talk about a guy that takes over your work much like Nolan does. And again, if you get him to ink you, you have to like his stuff because he is going to Rudy Nebres it. And this is Rudy over Sal Buscema. And no offense to Sal, but he never looked so good in my opinion. This is a great splash page. Tarzan splash page. Are you kidding me? Look at that. Look at that Pteranodon.
I just want to note this. This is interesting. We both chose a Sal image inked by a Filipino.
Interesting. Look at that. And I'm telling you right now, all that line work in there, Rudy put that in there.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely not Sal.
Yeah. And I always...
Even on the musculature of his chest, all that line work, that's not Sal.
No. And I'll tell you this. I got Rudy to ink something of mine one time for Valiant. Unfortunately, it wasn't Turok. I was begging to do a Turok pinup. Unfortunately, I didn't know the Turok editor. I knew some other editors there. And so I did a piece from that comic called The Visitor, which was kind of like an alien Batman type character that they had. But I did it with a bunch of stone gargoyles, with the Visitor fighting these gargoyles. Nebres inked it, redrew it, made it his own. But the beautiful thing about it was, much like Nolan, sometimes Rudy's anatomy when he's drawing himself is kind of funky. right?
Yeah.
And mine is more accurate, let's put it that way, to reality.
More technically proficient.
Yes. And so to have, and then he had the structure underneath it of my work, but then he just totally Rudyized it. And it's just a great looking piece. I just wish it would have been a Turok dinosaur piece, because that would have been the ultimate, right?
Well, but Jiminy Cricket agrees with you here. Sal Buscema's anatomy never looked that good.
But see, that's what he does. That's what Rudy does. He takes what you give him and then he dresses it up. And that's what Nolan does too. He takes what you give him and then dresses it up and kind of gives it their own style. And they really take over the art, but your structure's still there, you know? And so it's a really cool, cool combination.
You can still tell it's that artist, but yet it's not like anything that you've seen before from that particular penciler.
Right.
And I know this because I have a Nolan piece. I have a page from Sword of Azrael where he inks Quesada.
Quesada, yeah.
And again, you can tell it's Quesada, but if you look at like Quesada inked by, Mickey or inked by Palmiotti, and you look at this, you're like, it's very different from any other Quesada art you've ever seen.
Yes, it's very, very cool. And just as a side note, this page came up on eBay when I was at CrossGen. Ended up going for, I think, about $2,500, which is remarkable because it'd go for way more than that now.
Oh yeah,
but it was out of my price range, unfortunately, at that time.
I could easily see a piece like this hitting 5 figures.
Yeah, exactly, because it's such a great piece. And but I'm a big fan of Rudy Nebres over Buscema too, like his Conan stuff and like Savage Sword and stuff. Some people don't like it. Everybody's got their own favorite Filipino inker, right?
Yeah.
But Rudy is mine. And
the one that people don't. I've never really seen someone say they really love his work is Ernie Chan.
I'm not a big Chan fan.
That's what you hear from a lot of people. Is I'm not really. People love Rudy. They love Danny. They even kind of get into Tony DiZuniga even. But when you come to Ernie Chan, they're kind of like, it's Ernie Chan. That's kind of how they are about him. He's kind of also reign of that group. Solid.
I mean, I bought Claw the Unconquered. That's what he did for DC. I mean, he penciled and inked it himself. But yeah, I wasn't a big fan of him over Buscema. Peyton Holden always looking to take a shot at me whenever he can. Of course, he's referring to the Cornhuskers, Nebraska Cornhuskers football team. They have the week off, so he's making fun of my Huskers, and so therefore, Peyton gets one of those on a Saturday rather than waiting till tomorrow to get it.
Actually, if you scroll back up a little bit, he got one that really deserves a cannonball for you. He says this stream would be much better, would be much more interesting with James and an expert.
Okay.
That's so cold.
All right, hang on. Hey, this is it. There we go. I've done all I can to clean up the chat. But these guys are going to say what they're going to say. All right. I have one more Nebres piece, and this is actually Nebres over John Buscema. And I will make you guys aware of this issue if you aren't aware of it. James, I'm sure you are. But this was in Epic Magazine #1 and I think 2, the first couple issues of Epic Magazine, which was Marvel's attempt to be heavy metal. And this was John Buscema, Silver Surfer Galactus story. I believe Stan Lee wrote it. I may be mistaken on that. But it was John Buscema and Rudy Nebres. And it's a killer story. Great artwork. And I think it went over the first 2, maybe 3 issues. It may not have been that long. I may be mistaken, but
I mean, just that close-up shot of the surfer's face in the third panel is just that is absolute brilliance,
isn't it? It's just wonderful. And then all this sort of, this is obviously great John Buscema figure work, but again, Rudy going in there and just kind of giving it just a little bit of Rudy sauce, if you will. Look at these goofy, weird things down here. I was a big fan. Of course, obviously, I've shown it before. I had the original art from Weird World, that Nebres inked over Buscema that I just absolutely loved. So I don't know what John's opinion was of Nebres, but he must have liked him, because I don't know that they would have worked together as much as they did, especially on some of his pet projects like this. I'm sure it was a pet project, and I know Weird World was, and he had Nebres on both of those, so he must have liked what Rudy was doing work-wise over him.
Yeah, I think Jiminy Cricket hits it on why Ernie Chan is the also ran of the Filipino crew.
Ernie Chan wasn't distinctive enough. I think he was a workhorse, but style-wise, he didn't really stand out for many people. He had sort of I mean, not to say that Nebres wasn't heavy-handed, because actually all the Filipinos were heavy-handed. They always left their mark. You
always know when you're looking at a piece by them.
Right. But his stuff wasn't as stylized. It was, I hate to say things like this because I don't like to disparage artists, but I think his stuff was clunkier. And I think, people like Nebres was more elegant. Nino was very stylized, right? So it was very interesting and different.
Well, like when I think of Chan, I just think it's like his characters, when I'm like reading the books, they just feel too stiff.
He may have been a victim of
like they would move if they'd be moving in molasses type of thing, if they were actually physically to move, because they're kind of bigger, they're kind of chunkier, and the characters are stiff in their posing. It doesn't have the flow that a lot of the other guys may have had with some of their like a Rudy. He's got definite flow in what he does. Right. That's why it works.
Now, I know people that hate Rudy Nebres' stuff because he doesn't differentiate between his textures. Everything looks texturally the same, but I love his line so much that I don't care. So that's the personal bias, and we all have them depending on which artist we like or don't like. Marcus Killigrew says Buscema hated most inkers. I believe that.
Yeah, he said he liked Sal, Palmer, and Giacoya. He didn't even like Sinnott on the FF. Wow.
He probably felt Sinnott was too slick, because John Buscema was a big Hal Foster fan, and he always kind of pictured himself, like, especially doing Conan and things like that. He wanted that sort of softer, more illustrative feel. And Sal was a good inker. Sal was actually pretty good over Barry Smith on Conan, those early issues.
Yeah.
And I always liked Sal as an inker. Palmer's a guy that a lot of people like, and I liked his earlier stuff, didn't like his later stuff as much because it got a little heavy-handed, I felt.
Well, but I agree with, like I said, after he did the run with John Buscema on Avengers, after that he seemed to ink everybody that way, and there was never any differentials for who you're inking. Whereas, like I said, when you look at the past, he inked Neil Adams very differently than how he inked Gene Colan when he was on Tomb of Dracula. Those were very different, the way he approached those. But after Big John on the Avengers, he just kind of said, I'm just going to ink everybody this way.
Yeah. Well, I think you were in the industry for a long period of time, and then it sort of just becomes, you're not trying to make an artistic statement. You're trying to get work done and get a paycheck. And that's just the reality of life.
You're not trying to prove anything. You're just saying, I just want to get the job done and move on to the next job.
Let's see. Paul Brillard says Conan didn't like most of his inkers. I don't know if he meant Buscema or if he's making a joke here. Loved his DD and Iron Man. So are we talking about, Paul, are we talking about Buscema there? Buscema didn't like most of his inkers. Too bad. I loved his Daredevil and his Iron Man. Are we talking about... I don't know, Paul. You're going to have to clarify that.
Did he ever do a Daredevil run? I don't recall him doing a Daredevil
Well, he might be talking about Sal.
Okay. I
could be talking about Sal. Yeah. I'm sorry. He says Gene Colan, spell check sucks. Okay, so he's talking about Gene Colan. Okay.
Okay.
So not Conan. Conan no like inkers. So Gene Colan.
Okay, Gene had a huge Daredevil run and did quite a bit on Iron Man too, but the Daredevil run and Tomb of Dracula, I think, are his two biggest claims to fame.
He had a healthy run on Cap too, and I liked the thing that Colan did. I mean, his figure work sometimes was kind of rubbery, kind of wonky, but his faces were sometimes so beautiful, and his
Well,
eyes of his characters and
me,
stuff when he did
Nolan
close-ups.
is the master of light and shadow. That's what he is.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what he did better than anybody else, and that's why it was so perfect on a book like Tomb of Dracula.
Yes, exactly. I totally agree with you on that. All right, so there's our inkers, and of course, people we didn't mention like Wally Wood and was a terrific inker, and
Or Joe Sinnott,
Joe Sinnott. There's a ton. Scott Williams, would be a guy that sort of defined the pen and ink style, the modern pen and ink
another
style.
Another one again. I'm sure people are surprised we didn't mention Joe Rubinstein.
Yeah, yep. There was a lot of good inkers, but
these were just ones that stood out to us. That's all.
That's right. Just some of our favorites from maybe our childhood, or for me personally, guys I worked with that didn't ruin my stuff. That makes me very happy. So
Aaron's praise for an inker. You didn't ruin my stuff.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be said for that. Paul, I forgot John Severin. I absolutely love, but John Severin, in some ways, you might consider more of a finisher. Like, was it Pork Hunt? Someone brought it up earlier. We should do 2 shows, one on inkers and one on finishers, because Severin was, for my money, his work on King Cole was the best stuff he ever did, and that's a broad statement because he did a lot of work, but Marie did the pencils, and then John would come in over the top of her with the inks, and he probably did some finishes over that as well. But that was those first 9 issues before Plug took over with 10 were fantastic. Absolutely love those.
There's another one, Marcus Killiby. We're bringing in another guy we didn't talk about who's definitely a legend in the inking department.
Oh, yeah.
Dick
Giordano. Over Neil Adams. I mean, are you kidding me? It's just tremendous. So I mean, there's a lot, Nestor Redondo.
Redondo, again, another Filipino.
Yeah. Well, I always look at Redondo more of as an artist in terms of being a penciler and inker, because he was probably the most talented illustrator, penciler, drawer of all the Filipino guys.
I would agree with that.
And so he often penciled and inked his own stuff. So he inked other people, but it was usually his own stuff, at least that I recall. And but I love Redondo. Love his run on Swamp Thing gets overlooked. It's incredible, but because he followed rights and people just sort of overlooked it.
That is an unenviable task for any man, I think, to follow rights.
Yeah, there's certain guys you don't want to follow, right? There you go. Severin's War Comics. Yeah, I mean, dude, I am a huge Severin fan. Anything he did, I'm not a huge Western fan, although I've become more of a Western fan later in life, but never a war comic fan as a kid growing up. But like Combat Kelly, was a Marvel title in the early 72 that Severin did. And he did, was it Semper Fi in the 80s?
Yeah,
actually.
On Semper Fi, yes.
That was good stuff. So he's just terrific. Even his humor stuff is really, really good. He did for Crack Magazine. So,
well, again, Severin's one of the guys. He's done some superhero work. He's done fantasy work. He's done war. He's done humor, and he's done Western.
He's all genres.
He's kind of done everything. I think everything except maybe romance. He didn't do romance comics. That's about the only one he didn't do.
That may be. Well, you remember he inked Trimpy on the Hulk, and I love that stuff.
So that's what I'm saying. He's done superhero stuff. So I mean, he's kind of done all the genres, I think, except for romance. It was like the only one he didn't work in.
Yeah, he was. Tremendous work. Okay. So let's share some original artwork.
Horror Mike agrees with us.
Yeah, I don't think Redondo skipped a beat following rights, and his work is brilliant in that time. It really, really is. It's really nice stuff. Okay, let's share some original artwork. Do you want to go? You want to go black and white first, right?
Of course. That's the whole board. We're talking inkers, and in the vein of inkers, of course, I had to give you guys a piece by one of the people I talked about. So here it is.
There you go. Bang the drum slowly on the Rawhide Kid. Tell us about it, James.
This is issue 4 of the 80s miniseries, The Rawhide Kid. This takes place during a time where it's not him as a young man, it's him as an old man now. And this is a page from issue 4, the final issue, and it's pencils by Herb Trimpe, inks by Danny Bulinatti. And again, you can see, like as I was saying, how we did with Sal, a classic artist, and yet he kind of modernizes him a little bit. You can still tell it's Trimpe, but it's not like the Trimpe that you know.
Right.
And and I love this image, the way he makes the central figure stand out from everything going on around him.
Yeah.
And again, I love this because again, speaking of someone who is not a Westerns fan, this, for me to have this, it has to have something to it. And I think it's hilarious that someone who is such not a Westerns fan has one that has basically every trope you could want in a Western thing. You got horses, you got a burning town, you got the hero sauntering down the street with his hands ready to slap leather. I mean, everything about Western is in this image. And and I love Bulinatti's inking on Trimpe here. Again, like I said, he gives it that modern touch to a classic artist, because Trimpe's style to me works very well with this a genre like Western. But Bulinatti brings a little bit of modernity to the work of the like back here. This was in the 80s, the mid 80s, so he gives it that little 80s touch that you wouldn't have seen like in any previous Western books from like the 50s or the 60s.
Yeah, that's when this 1985 this came out.
85.
That's interesting. They were still doing. What was this in an annual or something, or what
It was
it?
a 4-issue miniseries.
Okay.
Written by one of my favorite writers of all, Bill Mantlo.
Bill Mantlo. Bill did. I like Bill's
miniseries. The funniest part about this, though, is issue 4 is the weakest issue of the miniseries as far as story goes. Like each one got progressively a little less. The first issue is like incredible. It's like you're like, oh my god, if this is how the miniseries is going to be, this is going to be awesome. But then issue 2 is good, not as good as 1, but good. 3 was kind of okay, and then issue 4 is kind of like this is probably the best image in the entire of the entire story of part 4 is this opening splash page. So
that's funny, because I may have said this a while ago. I don't know if I did it on this show or another one, where I had bought a collection of a trade paperback of a Skull the Slayer from the 70s, right? Because I remember that as a kid, loving that series because it was basically dinosaurs, and this guy is ex-con ending up in the kind of a savage land type thing.
Yeah,
I read it recently. What a bunch of crap. One of the worst written series I've ever read in my life, except the only good issue was one that Bill Mantlo wrote. So, for what that's worth.
Yeah,
anyway.
Again, Mantlo is one of my top 5 writers. So, I mean, if I see him writing something, oh yeah, let me read that. And then we got the color version for all you folks.
Yep, coming up right there. That's what it looks like
in
Living
product.
Life.
This is what it looks like in your book.
Mm-hmm. Bang the drum slowly.
And again, you can still the shadowing on the clouds of smoke by Bulinatti. I mean, that's really the telltale sign to me that you can tell this is Bulinatti inking. Is the way he does those clouds of smoke.
Now I wonder if this is the Rawhide Kid as an old man. Is he still the Rawhide Kid, or is he the Rawhide Man?
That's kind of something that they talk about in the miniseries too. Is like, well, you're really the kid because you're old now.
That's right. Are we still calling you the Rawhide Kid, or are you now the Rawhide Man?
They even make fun of the fact that like he wears false teeth now because he's so old.
Wait a minute. Where's he getting false teeth in the Old West? When they have to be made out of wood or something?
Yeah, they would be wooden, but they're still false teeth. That's just Can
you imagine? Have this nice brown, grainy smile.
That's kind of what this miniseries is about. It's about how like here he was, this guy is like Nolan is like, a great gunfighter, a gunslinger. He's the epitome of a young, vibrant man of the West. And then here's this miniseries in the 80s where it says, what happens if he gets old? And that's kind of what this miniseries goes into a bit, is like how, he doesn't fit in the modern world of the time. Like, he's like, I think it's like turn of the century, like the around the turn of the 20th century. And you're like, yeah, guys like you, we don't need you anymore. You're old. You're outdated. You're a relic of the past. And he kind of feels like that throughout the whole miniseries. And then in this issue, he kind of comes to terms with it.
Paul Brillart says just his skin was rawhide. So,
well, by this point, yes.
Yeah, it probably was. Marcus Killer, Jim Shooter didn't like Mantlo that much. Well, what does Jim Shooter know? Oh, see, at least the aged rawhide kid has hair.
That's another shot at you, Aaron.
I try to have a peaceful show on Saturday, but in comes Peyton to stir the pot. I'm telling you. There you go. The shootist. That was kind of the plot from the shootist. Yeah.
This miniseries very much feels like the themes mirror the John Wayne film, The Shootist. Yes, very much so. Like a gunslinger well past his prime. Times are changing, and they're moving on without him. And where does that leave him? Is like just like this relic of another time that's lost. You know, it doesn't really fit in anymore.
Well, I have a piece of original art. Of course, I know this is going to be a shocker that I drew. But it's inked by, actually, you know what? I'm going to briefly switch over to my Razor Kaio camera that has a much sharper image.
Porkon has a question for you, Aaron. Maybe you know this. I don't know if this is true or not.
Didn't Skull the Slayer become the new Blazing Skull? Well, the fact that I don't know who the Blazing Skull is, I can't answer that question, but it wouldn't surprise me. How's that for an answer? That basically means nothing. Okay, let me, I'm going to full screen here for a minute, if you don't mind, James.
Sure.
Okay, so this is a Conan story that 8-page Conan story I wrote and drew for Dark Horse. And this is actually inked by Matt Banning. You may know his signature as Bat. And I just thought it was interesting because he's a pen inker, and another guy I think did a really fine job over me as a pen inker. But look at how bold those holding lines are. He actually got this page when we split up the book, and I bought this from him because I wanted it. Because I like kind of the figure of Conan up here and just the action in the page with this ogre that he's fighting and the big old, beer belly he's got in the whole 9 yards. We got a close up there. And nice splatter effect. You do this with dipping a toothbrush into an inkwell.
I love the detail on those tusks.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. But you can see again how hard lined it is, and you can see that this is a pen inker, and it's just. But he was another guy that did pen inking that did a really nice job over me. That we worked with. I worked with on a couple of projects, shorter projects, but. So I just thought I'd share this. I don't know that Conan is particularly what we're talking about, but we're talking about inkers. So he's an inker. So I thought I'd show it to you. So there you go.
Matt Banning. Yes, that's another one we didn't talk about.
So it's another guy.
I hope folks are enjoying my little user handle for this episode.
That's right. Well, you want to give them the background on that, just in case they're not familiar with the quote.
Well, in case you guys know, this is my little shout out to the film Chasing Amy, where if you've ever seen the opening sequence, the opening bit in the movie, you get the joke.
You can.
You don't want to call inkers tracers because it doesn't end well for you.
That's right. Unless they are tracers and they suck, then you can call them out, right? But again, telling an artist that they suck is it's so subjective. That's just a terrible thing to do. What I always told when I was teaching a class way, way, way back in the day, they'd always say, "Oh, that so-and-so sucks," or "So-and-so sucks." I say, "No." I said, "So-and-so is a professional artist, so they clearly don't suck. What you're saying is, I don't like his work." And that's a fair assessment. You can say that, but don't definitively say someone sucks or they're this or they're that, because that's just your subjective opinion about them. So there you go. That's my public service announcement for today. All right. So
I just wonder, is anybody here disappointed that we did not talk about Vinnie Coletta? Is anybody disappointed by that?
Oh, hey, I've got it. This is a very good observation right here. Skip Edwards says that page is fantastic. His fades are so smooth for a pen. I actually complimented him on that because a lot of times brush inkers, it's easier to get that kind of blend out of a shadow area because you can go that thin to thick line just by using your brush, by the pressure you put on the brush. But a pen inker, you're not getting that line differential. So a lot of times, if someone fades out of a black with some cross hatching or line work, it'll look like a solid black with some straight lines coming out of it, which doesn't really create a soft fade, which I would always be going for. But Matt always did a really nice job of that. And I actually called him out on one of the things we did together. And I said, wow, your crosshatch out of that black is really a nice fade. So Skip,
Well,
nice eye.
Well, I guess Rob Brown answers us about Vinnie Coletta, about if they're disappointed.
No, not at all. Oh, man. All right. So let's wrap up this episode with a story from your do you want me to show the art? Do you want to tell the story, or how do you want to do
I'll
it?
tell the story first, and then we can show the image.
Okay.
Okay. This is 2007, Emerald City Comic Con. About a year and a half before, I had met artist Kirk Jarvin and his wife at the Portland Comic Con, the one that you know, the one in the underground dungeon basement that they had. And you know, him and my wife, they really hit it off because they grew up with a lot of the same stuff, and they just had that simpatico thing going on.
Yes.
And so this is a couple years later. We had done some shows. We had been at the shows with him, and he and his wife got a place with artist Joe St. Pierre and writer Sean C. Barry, and they were sharing it while they were at the show. And I think it was at the first night of the show, they invited us back. And of course, you know, everyone, as you know yourself, Aaron, being an artist, the vice of choice by artists is alcohol. So everyone had been doing a little bit of drinking. Sans myself, Mr. Teetotaler over here, I was the only one that was not drinking, but everyone else had been. And so I was talking with Joe St. Pierre and Kirk's wife, and off to the side, my wife and Kirk are staying talking, and of course they've both been drinking, and like they were definitely buzzing. You could just tell by and the way I could tell, because they were just nonstop talking. I mean, it was just nonstop talk for like 30 minutes about heavy metal bands. And I'm kind of like eavesdropping and listening in every once in a while, and it's just, they're still going on about them. And I just kind of felt it was like watching like a Charlie Brown's cartoon, like you know how all the adults go wah 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 wah. But it's like that, but like metal 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 metal. That's all it was for like 30-40 minutes straight, just them talking about metal bands and their love of all these great bands they grew up watching and going to the concerts, and it was just hilarious. So the next day at the show, Kirk did this little drawing for her that has never been shown anywhere before, but you are going to see it here tonight. This is a reveal, folks, that has never been seen since it was done in 2007. He drew her this image based on their little dissertation the night before.
All right, here it comes.
Metal bands.
Here it comes. Boom.
Once upon a time in the 80s in Hillsboro, Oregon, on the farm.
I don't even know what to make of that.
Headbanging while shaving the sheep. That is hilarious.
Oh my gosh. Thrash. I love that.
I just love the expression on the sheep's face.
It's like stoned or something, you know?
It's like, God, either that or like just like, oh God, just let it end. And of course, one of her favorite bands, of course, is Metallica. So of course he had Master of Puppets playing in the background there.
Oh, that is so good.
I think I'm in trouble though now. If you take a look in the chat, I think I'm in trouble.
Oh, what was this? I can't believe you showed. Oh, that's your wife saying that. I can't believe you showed that. Oh, I guess you are. Heidi's not happy.
I think I might be in trouble now.
Oh, well. That's so funny though. That's great. I mean, whenever you can have a piece of artwork from a con or something that's attached to a story. That's pretty good. So there, Heidi's request, we'll take that down. Okay, now along the lines of inking, I may have told this story before, but you know what the heck. And I'll show the art in a minute, but I got a sketch from Alex Nino in my book, and I asked him to do kind of like a troll or a goblin or something. And I was thinking more traditionally in terms of what you might see in Lord of the Rings. And he gave me something that was so funky and weird. Now, granted, I mean, it's Alex Nino, so that should be expected. But as much as I liked it, and I do, it still didn't kind of capture what I wanted in the book, right? So it was a few years later at San Diego, and I was over talking to David Williams, and he showed me this picture of Batman, or I think it was Batman. And it was by Alex Nino. And I said, I mean, it looked cool, but at the same time, it looked like not as funky as Nino might have drawn it just had he been left to his own devices, right? And so I asked him, I go, wow, that's Nino? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I penciled it, took it over to Nino and had him ink it. And that way I kind of got my drawing with Nino's inks. And I went, that's freaking genius. So I went back and penciled a zombie. I did exactly what I wanted Nino to draw, right? And I knew he'd like turn it into a Nino drawing, but it would be what I wanted, right? So yeah. I did that, dropped it off to him. He did it. And throughout the whole thing, it was very strange because I kept going, Alex, how much do you want for it? And I think he was reluctant to charge me because I was a fellow pro. So he's like, just, a tank of gas. And I was like, well, okay, how big of a car are you driving? You know what I mean? What does that mean, right? You give me money for a tank of gas. So I kept trying to pin him down, and he'd go, we'll figure out something, or we'll tank of gas, or and so I could never pin him down on a number. So I never actually gave him anything for the sketch because he just, he finally just gave it to me, and I was like, all right. So let me show you what it looks like. And again, I've shown this before, but it's a cool piece. So. And it is, our topic is inking. So here we go. So basically, let me go full screen here.
Wow.
So now if you look, you can see the pencils up here of my tree. It's kind of in there. And the moon, which he didn't put in. The tree came over. So he kind of used this as just a template. And totally Ninoized it. Yeah, and so I've got this great picture of a zombie coming out of the ground, and it's totally, what I imagined in my head, except it's by Nino, not me.
Yeah, Aaron, if you did not tell this story and have your signature on the image, I would never have guessed you even worked on this.
Yeah. Well, it is funny because it's funny because he didn't sign it Nino over Lopresti. He just put Nino on there, and I went, well, come on now. You got to give me a little credit. So I put that in myself. But I mean, isn't that great? So now I've got that sort of that Alex Nino piece that I want. I'll show you the other one real quickly that he did. It's cool, but Adam Hughes. There it is. So I said, draw me like a troll or a goblin. And he did that, which is the funkiest looking thing. At least got a screw where a machete is attached to his arm. I mean, it's just total bizarro. I mean, that's a pretty cool face and everything. So it was cool. And that's exactly what you'd expect from Nino, to do something really weird like that.
Is that a finger up by his jawline? Yeah, like right there. Is that a finger right there?
No, I think that's just, it might be. Now that I look at it, it might be.
He just got appendages all over the place.
Yeah, it's freaking weird, man. But so I was like, I looked at this, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But then I was like, I want something more traditional. So I drew the traditional thing, and he inked it, and so now I got my zombie piece by Nino. So anyway, that's that. And I never paid for it, which I still kind of feel guilty for, but not too guilty. Okay,
well,
we don't need to see.
Horror Mike gives you thumbs up for it.
Well,
of course, given his name, why wouldn't he?
I tell you, I have negotiated some original art from more than shamelessly negotiated some cheap original art for some people that when it's about getting the art, you do what you got to do to get what you want. So
and Dino Palacio, I don't know. Is that cannonball worthy?
Actually, no, because it's the truth. Oh my goodness.
And there goes, there's Pork Hunt. Pork Hunt coming in at the bottom there.
Nino pulverized Aaron. Yeah, he did, but I wanted him to. That was the whole that's true too, right there. That is a great cover. I have that cover. Has the collector on the back going back behind Man-Thing fighting Hulk. So all right, guys, we're gonna wrap this up because I have to do another show in like 13 minutes. It's unbelievable. I'm all over the place.
Aside from our usual shill, guys, which is down below there, we got the links, got my art gallery, got the MeWe group, got the YouTube channel. Go check all those out. And of course, if you haven't already, and shame on you if you haven't, back Wraith of God Blood Hunters. It's up right now. It's nearing that $100,000 mark to put the Kit Carter story in there. We want it in there. Get off the duff, guys. Get that over 100K so we can have Kit Carter added to this 100-page spectacular.
There you go. There's a salesman right there. Thank you so much.
Now,
yes,
for the big announcement last month, I said there would be a big special announcement for you guys on this show. Here it is. Now, as you all know, next month is Halloween month. And as you know, Aaron and I are huge horror fans. So there is no way possible that we could extol and express all our love for our favorite holiday in one single show. So for you guys, as a special treat and not a trick, we're going to do 2 comic art convos next month. The first one on the 15th, and then the second one on the 29th, which is be the official Halloween episode. So you guys got a special treat for next month, 2 shows instead of 1. So instead of waiting 5 weeks now, like you would have had to, you're going to see one in 3 weeks, and then another one 2 weeks after that. So there you go, guys. That was the big announcement. 2 comic art convos in October, because Aaron and I are such lovers of horror, we can't squeeze it all into one show. Just
remind me, because I'll forget.
Why do you think I keep coming to your streams and always am in the chat reminding you?
No, don't forget about Comic Art Convo. Yeah. No, that's it. That's this Saturday. Oh yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, hey,
and I'll give you that. The first one we're going to do. I've been thinking about this long and hard because I know what the second one's going to be already. We've already told you guys what that was back several months ago. But the one we're going to do on the 15th, coming up, the very first one, is our favorite comic book villains. Since it's the month of horror and the month of evil, let's go evil. Bring on the bad guys.
Favorite comic book villains. That's going to be our first one.
That's going to be the one on the 15th. The opening topic is our favorite comic book villains.
And then we're doing movies after that.
And then on the 29th, our second one is our favorite low-budget horror movies. Because we do our low-budget non-horror movies.
That's right.
Now this one on the 29th, the official Halloween episode, will be our favorite B horror movies.
I recall that episode, the B films, because you referred to many B level actors as the great so-and-so.
They are great in the B level.
They're legends in B movies.
Legends of low budget. Yes, the legends of low budget.
So I'm guessing that I'm going to hear you say at some point, the great Ingrid Pitt, right?
Or the underappreciated genius
of Ingrid Pitt.
Yes, something like that. Yes.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We wouldn't have a show if you didn't show up to watch, and we greatly appreciate it. We had a tremendous audience throughout this whole thing today. A lot of fun talking about inkers, and I can't wait to get to October so we can start talking about monsters and villains and all sorts of
well, here's some good news for you from Randy Howell, Aaron. He got some good news for you right there.
Well, Randy backed like 9 or 10 times last campaign, so I'm expecting much more backing from him as the campaign goes along. That's right. I want him to break his records. So anyway, you guys, thanks for joining us.
Marcus Killigrew, the 29th is his birthday on October. October 29th is his birthday. So he's getting a special comic art convo. We'll do a shout out to Marcus. We'll do a shout out to you on your birthday, Marcus.
That's right. Bring cake for everyone. All right, I got to run because I got to go someplace else and do this all over again. But thank you for joining us. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and look for us next time on Comic Art Convo.
See you guys soon.